discuss this further, we have with us Alan Burstein, visiting assistant professor at the Israeli Institute, fellow Department of Political Science, University of California. Thank you so much for being here with us today on World DNS. Now, Khalid Mishal was considered as a strong contestant. However, Hamas has now chosen Yahya Sinwar as their next chief. The pertinent question being, why was Yahya Sinwar chosen over Mishal, and what is the broader messaging being sent out to Israel with this selection?
First of all, thank you for having me. There's a lot of importance around this decision of Hamas. First of all, the fact that Khalid Mashal lost, and he lost largely because Yahya Sinwar vetoed him. The external leadership of Hamas wanted Khalid Mashal, but Yahya Sinwar said no. Now, according to reports, he said no because he wanted someone, he thought maybe it would be Khalil al-Hayya, who was closer to Iran or Syria. But really, this indicates the shifting weight, as you said, of the war and of the Hamas movement from the external leadership to the internal leadership. Ever since the assassination of Hamas's founder in 2004, Ahmed Yassin, the leadership has moved abroad, and the larger leadership, the more prominent leadership, has been abroad. This is a game changer. For the first time in 20 years, the leader of the Hamas movement is going to be in the Palestinian territories, in the Gaza Strip. And more than that, Yahya Sinwar is also effectively the leader of the Al-Qassam brigades. Mohammed Def is dead. He appointed someone else to be the leader, but he's the one who appointed him. So for the first time in 20 years, we have the leader of the political bureau being also the leader of the military wing. And this is a game changer for the movement, and it remains to be seen how it actually leads the movement in a different trajectory. Yahya Sinwar is one of the more radical figures. He's against the ceasefire. But it remains to be seen how this new position may change his position or not. But Hamas is a different movement as of today than it was yesterday.
Alan, as you mentioned, he's been a radical figure and is one. Sinwar has largely remained elusive since October 7th and reported to be hiding in the Gaza tunnels. There was a brief visual of him probably shared back in February, which just showed a glimpse of him getting out of the tunnel. Khalid Mashal instead is based in Qatar, just like Ismail Haniyeh was. How do you feel ceasefire talks will be impacted now that Hamas has a Politburo who has been in hiding throughout?
So to some extent, it's going to make the negotiations harder, but to some extent, it's actually going to make the negotiations more straightforward. One of the things we saw in the negotiations is that the external leadership was almost embarrassed. They could not commit to a ceasefire. Ismail Haniyeh wanted to go forward with a deal, but until Yahya Sinwar said yes, Ismail Haniyeh was the leader of Hamas, but actually he had no control over what happened in Gaza. Now, if the leadership agrees, then the leadership is also in control of what happens in the Gaza Strip. What we're likely to see is Sinwar's deputy, Khalil al-Hayya. This was his deputy in the Gaza Strip, and now he's been appointed to be his deputy in the political bureau also. He's abroad. He was in Egypt the last time we heard. He is likely to become the most direct figure of negotiations. It may make negotiations harder because Yahya Sinwar is a radical. He was against the ceasefire. But at the same time, if the movement agrees to something, then we know that the internal movement is also agreed to it, as opposed to if Ismail Haniyeh agreed to it, it may have meant nothing for the fighting in the Gaza Strip. So now there's a more direct line to the fighters in the Gaza Strip.
Right, Alan, we've been talking here about how Sinwar has been in hiding. The question being is that, will Sinwar reveal himself to carry out the duties like Haniyeh did? And does that perhaps make him more vulnerable, as Israel has already called for the swift elimination of the new Hamas chief?
So I think it depends, I'll say this directly, I think it depends how long he remains alive. I think that if the war comes to a ceasefire, he will definitely come out in public and be a very big political figure. Historically, the political leader of Hamas has more safety. I mean, Ismail Haniyeh was killed, but that was the first time the political leader of Hamas was killed in the political bureau in a very long time. So in that sense, it is possible that the appointment of Yahya Sinwar as the political figure gives him some immunity with Israel, not as long as the war is going on. As long as the war is going on, Israel will do everything possible. It's also very important for Netanyahu militarily as well as politically to manage to assassinate Yahya Sinwar. So as long as the war is going out, I think we're very unlikely to see Sinwar come out. If it comes to a ceasefire, we will probably see him come out and be a very big public figure. One more thing I'll say, historically, whenever a leader was appointed the head of the political bureau, they left the Palestinian territories. We saw this with Ismail Haniyeh. He was the leader of Hamas in Gaza. In 2017, he's appointed the political leader. He left to Qatar, to Syria, then back to Qatar. So in that sense, one might expect Sinwar to leave the Gaza Strip, and maybe he will because he'll feel safe, but much more likely he'll stay in the Gaza Strip. And that is another one of the big changes we're going to see in Hamas, that the leader will actually be in the Palestinian territories physically while the fight is going on.
Alan, you made some very pertinent points there that, at first glance, one would assume that things would get more complicated because there is a Hamas chief who's now in hiding, who has been in hiding and is now the chief. But as you mentioned, that it could also make things more straightforward because he's there on ground. So there could perhaps be a change implemented because he's right there next to the people in Gaza, as opposed to Ismail Haniyeh, who was in Qatar. Of course, this is a developing story. We'll have to see how this plays out and how Sinwar is going to, carry out his duties now as the chief. Thank you so much for joining in. That was Alan Burstein joining us from California.
Thank you. Have a good night or good day.